Okay, in this video we are going over the De Bello Gallico, Book 4, chapters 30 and probably 31. Remember that the soldiers of Caesar are in a bad way because they've lost a lot of their ships. They don't have a way by which they're going to be able to get back home because of the storms and their negligence of not realizing that there was going to be high tide. And also, they are now with the prospect of an extended stay, unprepared food-wise. And so in line, or I should say chapter 30, the Britons are going to recognize this and probably try to take advantage. So, Quibus rebus, again this is just a linking qui. You could replace it with, of course, his from hikakok or elise. So with these things, rebus, res rei, having been recognized, cognosco cognoscere, the leaders of Britain, those principes, chieftains, who, after the battle, had come together to Caesar, having talked, and collocuti, take off the C-O-N, and you end up with loquor, loqui, locutus sum, having talked amongst themselves, when, since, or although. You go to see if you have a imperfect subjunctive, which you do, and thus it is going to be when, since, or although. You've gotten rid of one of the whens. You look for tom in. If there is a tom in, it's going to be although. But there's not. And so therefore when or since. And you just have to go with which one makes more sense. So when or since they understood, intelligo and telegere, these are the, of course, leaders, the chieftains, when they learned or when they understood that the cavalry and the ships and the grain supply was lacking. It is a present infinitive that occurs at the same time. And remember, de plus esse means to lack, whereas de plus facere, de facio, de facere, means to fail. So was lacking for the Romans, and when or since they recognize, cognosco cognoscere, the paucity of soldiers, so they knew they didn't have that many people, from the exiguitate, exiguitas is smallness or slightness of the camps, so usually the camps much bigger, and that's what exactly it says, the camps, which were, even because of this, more narrow. Remember, angustus means narrow, because Caesar had perfectly transported the legions without baggage trains. Now, impedimenta, in the context here, it means the baggage train. This is the whole accoutrement that comes along with traveling with a large army. You need tents, you need cooking utensils, you need equipment for carpentry, building stuff, like palisades and things of that nature. And so it says, the slightness, the smallness of the camps which were even more narrow because of this. And this is then told to you that he doesn't even have the baggage train along. So they are really, really lacking. And the Brits apparently have recognized this. They know there are not that many soldiers. And so they are obviously going to take advantage, as we learn in the next section. They led. Now, it's not led as in the traditional sense, duco, ducere, duxi, ducus, but led in their mind. They thought. Duco can sometimes mean think. They thought that it was best. It was the best thing, and then the supine. The supine either ends with um, that shows purpose with a verb involving motion, or the supine that ends with u, that is your ablative specification. They thought it was the best thing to do, the best thing in terms of doing. With ablative absolute, a rebellion having been made, they thought it was the best thing to do to prohibit our guys from the grain supply and from the trading back and forth. In other words, that obviously the way the Romans are surviving whenever they're out and about in Gaul and now in Britain is that you trade with the local villages, or you coerce the local villages to supply your army with grain, food, those sorts of things like that. And they thought that it was the best thing to do, not only to prohibit our guys from grain and trade, to lead out the situation into the winter. Remember that hiemus is the winter. They're going to string it out because with them, meaning them, the Romans, the enemies for the Britons. With them having been conquered or overcome, or having been cut off, intercludo, intercludere, of course, means to cut off. It's where you get the word secluded, but this is intercluded, cut off. They were confident. So with them conquered, or with them having been cut off from a return, in other words, back to Gaul, where the Romans had come from, they were confident that nobody, naming him, would go across. You add an essay to this future active participle to make the infinitive. Now the infinitive future, which it is going to occur after the confidebant. If the confidebant is in the past, then the going across could also be in the past, could be in the present, could be in the future, so you say would. They were confident that nobody would go across into Britain afterwards for the sake of war about to be brought on. We would say idiomatically for the sake of bringing on war, but it is a gerundive because it is modifying the word belly. Essentially they're thinking that this is our moment, this is our time. If we can strike the knockout blow against the Romans and Caesar particularly, they'll never come and bother us again. So they see that all of their eggs need to be placed in this basket. Therefore, again, Rursus, with a conspiracy having been made paulatim. Now, paula means a little bit. Paulata means little by little. Little by little, they began, and remember this is one of those defective verbs. They include quapi, quapisse. Those do not normally look like your principal parts usually look like. Amo, amare, duco, ducere, video, videare. Instead of the present first-person singular, they give you the perfect first-person singular, and then the perfect infinitive instead of the present active infinitive. And that is because these verbs only exist in the perfect system. Perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect. The other two that you need to know are odi and maimony. So, with a conspiracy having been made, therefore again, little by little they began to go out from the camps and to lead out their own guys secretly clomb out of the fields. And so they begin to amass a force, an army, but they do so secretly and little by little. I always use an example of, let's say you're going to dine and dash. Don't dine and dash, but there's a bunch of you. You don't all get up at one time and just walk out of the restaurant. One person gets up and says, I have to go to the bathroom. Another person gets up, I have to make a phone call. And you do it gradually to where they don't notice, it's imperceptible, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're leaving from these Roman camps, and instead they're going back to their villages and planning this attack, as it were. Nevertheless, chapter 31. But Caesar, et si, even if not yet the plans of them, remember plan is concilium, here we are, concilii, even if not yet had he recognized the plans of them, their plans, nevertheless, both from the outcome, the eventus, it's nothing more than veni venire veni ventus with an X on the front, from the outcome of his own ships, and ex el quod, the whole thing just means like because, and out of the thing which, and because they had paused, intermittere means to pause, they had paused to give the hostages. We idiomatically in English would say they had paused giving the hostages, they had stopped, obviously, these exchanges. He suspected. Suspicio or suspicare. It is a deponent verb, looks passive, translates active. He suspected that, and remember that fore is a formation of futurum esse, which is a future actor infinitive in this indirect statement. He suspected that, and since we're starting the past with the future, it would be that this thing would be which did happen. Caesar is telling you that he suspected, that he thought that the Britons might try to press their advantage. Because if he can look at his own ships and realize that he's in a bad way, and when he notices that they had stopped bringing hostages, that something would have been afoot. And so he suspected that it would be the thing which happened. So he anticipated this. He took plan. Therefore, he was preparing subsidia, helps. Subsidium, subsidii is a help. But here's more like a contingency. So he was preparing contingencies, helps, for the purpose of all downfalls. So in other words, if they were to try this, he has a plan. If they were to try that, he has a plan. So he's obviously trying to anticipate. Nam et frementum. For, and here you have again the formation of et. Et and then et, which remember, of course, there it is. Both and. For both was he bringing grain out of the fields every single day, quotidie, on the daily, into the camps, and they which, the ships which, this is referring to the ships, and there you can see it, and the ships which erant adflictae, had been afflicted, a pluperfect passive, those ships which had been afflicted most gravely, he, utebator. Now remember, there are 5 verbs that all require an ablative object. They are utor, fruor, fungor, potior, and waskor. He was using the material of them, so the ships that had obviously been battered the most. He was using the material and the bronze. Both of these are ablative objects of utebator, which is deponent verb, looks passive, translates active, for the purpose of the remaining ones, ships, reficiendas, about to be remade, about to be repaired. And those ones, in other words, the ships, which were for the purpose of a use, remember we would say useful, but here it is the dative of purpose, for the purpose of these things, so those obviously that can be used, he was ordering those ships to be carried from the continent. Essentially what he is doing is he is parting out ships. I think of my father. He has so many dead vehicles on his property where he lives. And one of the reasons why he has dead property, dead vehicles, is because whereas the whole vehicle might not be good, if his vehicle breaks down, he might have a starter on another. My father has bought trucks that do not run just because it gives him the opportunity if he ever would need a part. Because the truck that he buys that does not run is exactly like the truck he drives. That's called parting it out. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of going to a junkyard and getting actual parts off of cars. They let you go out, and if you pick it yourself, pick and pull, then it's a certain price, but if they have already taken the part off of the car, it's a little bit more because they've done the work. That's exactly what Caesar is doing here to these ships. He's essentially parting them out. They are no good to sail anymore, but he can use the stuff from them. The car might not run, but you can use the starter, you can use the alternator. You just can't use, let's say, the radiator. So nevertheless, therefore, cum sumo studio administrator. Therefore, it was being administrated. It was being conducted with sumo studio, with the greatest zeal, the greatest enthusiasm by the soldiers. They are excited about this prospect. There's at least hope now that maybe we can get some ships fixed. With 12 ships having been lost, he, referring to Caesar, made it. He made it happen. That it was able to be sailed conveniently, appropriately, on the remaining ones. Kind of like in a tight spot, sometimes you can fit 7 people in a car. That's usually designed only for 4. And that's what it's saying, is that you're going to have to overload these ships, but they can make it with the ships that they will have. So again it says, therefore, it was being conducted, it was being administrated, this parting out, repairing of the ships, by the soldiers with the greatest enthusiasm. With 12 ships having been lost, remember Amida was to lose, he made it, that it was able to be sailed good enough, commode, appropriately, conveniently, on the remaining ships, or on the remaining ones, as it were. In chapter 32, we are going to now encounter the actual attack that is going to come into fruition. So in that next chapter, the Britons put their plan into effect.